Derek Brown, also known as DREC FPV, runs customer service for PyroDrone. Y'all know him, y'all love him. He talks a lot in this episode about what it takes to do customer service with grace and where he learned some of that grace. It's pretty deep, and I hope that you enjoy it.
Ladies and gentlemen, I bring to you the one, the only Derek A. Brown, aka Waterfall Chaser. How you doing, buddy?
Doing good, man. It's good to be here.
Thank you. It's good having you on. I've been looking forward to this interview for a while. I think you're one of those guys that kind of flies a little bit under the radar, but everybody seems to love you. And so I've been looking forward to having you on for quite a while. So I'm glad we could finally sit down.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate the invite. I'm super excited about this.
So, we always start off the interview talking about your origin story. So tell me what your origin story is. How did you get into FPV or flying in general?
So it all starts with how I got into RC, which I messed with it as a kid a little bit, but then went away with it. And then many years later, I was talking to my father-in-law. He's always a great source for advice. I asked him, I was trying to get his old Trail 90 Honda off of him so that me and my son could work on it and get it going and all that. And Tayton was, I guess, about 10 at the time. And he says, well, why don't you get some RC cars? You guys could work on those. And I'm like, that's a cool idea. And I hopped on eBay, bought some Losi Mini Tees and started playing with those, and then was buying a bunch of other parts on eBay, started selling those parts. Then I started buying the Blade, the Horizon Hobby, little helicopters, the MCXs. I was buying them broken and fixing them and selling them after I fixed them. And then I came across some drone stuff, and it was just like the Sima. That wasn't even my first one, but some random little one, and it's the coolest freaking thing ever. And then out of nowhere in 2013, I bought a Gaui Y6 kit, and I had to buy a bunch of the other parts for it too. And I got it all off eBay at the time. It had a KK2, little screen on it.
Oh yeah.
It didn't have FPV, but that was like my first taste of like a brushless multi-rotor, I was like, what? Yeah. Hooked. And shortly thereafter, I opened an RC store locally. There wasn't one around. Hadn't been one. I got into collective pitch helicopters and big planes and all that. Was still playing with the drones, but without FPV. And then in 2014, a customer came in with a TBS Discovery with all the FPV gear, and he was wanting to get into something else. And I was like, well, yeah, I'll buy this, and gave him some store credit for it. And the rest is history. I messed with that, and I was so busy with the store and all that I didn't get to build a lot. But my buddy at the time, Josh Welty, actually built my first as a Lumineer QAV 250. It's right up there at the top. Yeah. Boop. He put it together for me the first time. I ordered all my parts from Twisted Quads, and you can actually see a video online of when I first started flying that in 2015, I think it was, trying to do my first roll and my first flip.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, and then I just dove head first. For the most part, but when I closed the store due to lack of capital and all that, that's when this became like a full-time hobby for me. It wasn't just my living anymore. So I was able to really get my passion back for it when I dropped the rest of the stuff I was doing, because I was doing competitive RC rock crawling and things like that. But I just dropped. If it doesn't fly, I don't have it anymore. And ever since then, I fly winter, summer, whenever, pretty much weekly. If I miss a week, I'm flying at least within 2 weeks. But I fly constantly. I'd love to do it. I record everything in HD, but never put out footage because it's not good enough. So that's what got me into FPV where I am.
So one thing that I took a look at your channel, and you seem to have a love affair with waterfalls. I honestly, and I don't know if you know this, but you shouldn't go chasing waterfalls. Um,
Disagree.
we got to throw the TLC reference in there for all the old people.
Uh,
What? Number one, how do you find so many waterfalls? And number two, like what draws you with all this electronic equipment to the waterfalls?
Two great questions. The first one, I live in Oregon.
Okay.
I'm surrounded by beautiful mountains and everything. They're just everywhere. I've got. We went up to Watson Falls the day after West Coast Throwdown, which was the last week of August, and then within that 6-week period, I flew 6 or 7 waterfalls, 4 of them within 1 week. Steve from Belgium, he stayed with me, and we went out and I showed him a bunch of waterfalls and flew them all. So I'm gonna do a compilation video of those, the last few weeks of all of those here shortly. But they're easy to find for me because of where I live. That's the answer to the first question. It's about to trail off there. Second question, I should mention I don't use conformal coding, first of all.
Oh my God, are you serious?
Yeah. Which is the only reason I got knocked out of the sky on that inverted orbit. I passed right through the waterfall, and it's like, you're done. But living in Oregon, I fly in heavy mist, heavy fog, over ocean waves where you get the mist, waterfalls, clearly, rivers and everything else, and it's not an issue for me. It never has been in the 5 years I've been flying FPV. So yeah, I do see a use for it though. Like I really want to dive in the waterfall and come all the way down and pop out of it.
Yeah.
Because it's the right speed for most of these waterfalls. They hit their terminal velocity for that amount of, not terminal velocity, but their speed for that area they have, and the drone hits pretty equal or faster. So I do want to conformal code something and get really stupid, but yeah, I think that answers those 2 questions.
So have you? I mean, in your channel, I mean, you go under, like you're not. And just so folks know, like they need to check out your channel, because you're not like, orbiting waterfalls at like, 50 feet off. I mean, you're right up on them. And with all of that playing with water, I mean, have you ever lost any electronics to water?
I've lost in the years I've been doing this, I've lost a couple of camera sensor boards. Like if you get water inside the camera casing, it can ruin a sensor. It doesn't always, but it can. So I've had that happen a couple times. I've lost. I don't run motors until they give up. I just replace them with new motors when I feel like those motors are old. But I can say that I've had some bearings give up sooner than they should have, because of water damage. Because I've put quads in the water. I've crashed in the water.
Sure, yeah.
You grab it, you unplug it, and I use my air compressor and I'll blow all the water out of it, and then I try and let it sit somewhere warm. If it's summertime, it sits in a window. If it's wintertime, it sits above the fireplace, and let it sit a few days and fire it up.
That's all. Even seawater?
I've only had one go in the ocean. Okay. And I was lucky enough, and that video is online. I was lucky enough that my best friend was spotting and ran out there. And he never runs. He ran out there and he grabbed it out of the water for me, and I was just so freaking thankful. But there was a little freshwater waterfall that was right there. It's only like 10 feet tall, so it's not powerful. I just walked right over there and watched the quad under the fresh water and put it away the rest of the day. Came home, washed it again really good with a hose, and let it dry out. And then, I flew it another few months. But those motors didn't like that salt water.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, one of the things I was surprised about with the kind of content that you put out, I mean, it's good, and you have a good eye for a good cut. You typically tell a story with your edits. Um, I was kind of shocked to see that you really don't have this kind of the number of followers that I would expect for the quality that you're putting out.
I
Um,
appreciate it.
why, do you have any thoughts on why that is, or is
Yeah.
that just not pushing it?
Yeah, it's a lack of consistency with posting new videos.
Okay.
I I have I have so much footage, especially between me and my best friend Nathan Baker, because we go on all these adventures together.
Hmm.
Uh, I have so much freaking footage that I just don't put out, and if I did, on a consistent basis, like when I do start posting stuff somewhat consistently, I immediately see a surge and an
Hmm.
uptick. Like my YouTube, I don't even have 1,000 followers, and both my Instagram and my Facebook, I've got over 1,000 because I spend more time on those.
Right.
They
Okay.
have pictures too. YouTube just has videos, and
Yeah.
I that's part of the curse of doing the customer service thing is I spend all day at the same computer that I would edit at. So
Okay.
sometimes it's hard for me to sit down at that same computer and pop out some footage. All of
Yeah.
my best flying in my entire time of flying is from the last 2 years, year and a half, and I've been working at my computer that whole time, so I haven't put out a lot of videos.
Okay. That makes sense. Like for over a decade, I worked at home, and there were definitely still are time periods. I worked in this shed for this is a shed, by the way. I worked in this shed for 12, 14 hours a day, and you just want to walk away. You don't want to be next to that same thing that for so long. So I get that.
Yeah.
Um, so you are, even though you don't have like a huge number of subs on YouTube, and I think you're right. I think consistency plays a huge part in growing on YouTube. Um, you're still pretty well known, and you are well known in a way that is unusual in the FPV field, in the FPV sphere. Um, Everybody seems to get along with you, and everybody seems to like you. Um, and I honestly, I've tried to. Well, okay, so we can talk about that. I've tried to thread something of that needle myself, right? Where it's like, be fair and do this thing and try to just be friends with everybody. That is a really hard line to walk. I feel like you've walked it well. What do you attribute that to?
A lot of past mistakes.
Okay.
I've had a rocky past. I've um, yeah, yeah, I'll talk about it. I've been in prison.
Okay.
It was for DUIs, like
Okay.
many years ago at this point. My last any sort of run in with anybody or with my how would I put this? The last time I got in trouble was my 30th birthday,
Hmm.
and I'm about to turn 39,
Okay.
and that DUI on my 30th birthday uh, put me in prison.
Man.
So, yeah,
How long were you in there for?
2 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, state of Oregon here. I actually got two within a couple of months. Nobody's fault but my own. I was just
Yeah.
going through this stage where I thought I had to party with all my friends all the time instead of uh, be at home. My wife and I were split up at the time because I was an idiot, and
Yeah.
uh, yeah. So when I don't have that balance in my life of my wife,
Hmm.
I made bad decisions, and I got a couple DUIs a couple months apart, and I had two others that were like 8 years old. But if you get a certain amount in 10 years, your third and up, it's automatic prison time in Oregon.
Wow.
So yeah.
In full disclosure, so I'm a recovering alcoholic myself. I've got about 6 months sober right now. It's a hard road to walk, and like I don't know where you are in that. I've also definitely had some crazy run-ins with my wife. We've been separated before. Were you able to work that out with your wife, or?
Oh yeah, okay. Yeah. No. Sometimes in our life we ask God to help us through something. We don't know what we're asking for, but we know that we need it, and we don't always get the answer that we want or that we expect. I got my answer, and unfortunately, it was prison. And when I got that second DUI, I bailed out, and immediately reconciled. Like it was just an immediate, things are going bad, and I need to do everything I can to fix this right now.
Yeah.
I had for lack of a better term, a real come to Jesus moment.
Yeah.
From that time, I actually didn't drink for, I don't know, 5 or 6 years, something like that. But we reconciled. I had to do the whole court thing, and I ended up doing a plea bargain because, mandatory minimums and all that. The judge had some choice over whether to overlap the two sentencings or to not overlap them and stack them. He partially overlapped them, so it ended up 25 months for 2 DUIs. One of them, I was literally just sleeping in the vehicle with the keys in the ignition. But it's still my fault. There's no way around it. So I had about 9 months with my family, my wife and my son and my daughter, before I went. And I know that a lot of people, when they're going to do time, it's all about how can I spend my time? How can I make this time pass by as quick as possible? That's what everybody's trying to do. And when you spend something, that's for the moment. You're not expecting any sort of return on that. But when you invest something, you can expect a return on that. And so I made a choice right away that this time's happening no matter what. There's no way of getting around this. It's up to me if I'm going to invest or spend that time. So I chose from the very beginning to invest that time. A couple things going in. I never bought a TV. That's what everybody wants, a TV, so they can just watch TV all day. And I didn't, I bought a guitar. I brushed up on that. I could talk for hours about the things. I set a list of goals, and then I set a list of other goals that maybe I'll get this done too. I got every single goal I even thought about doing, I made happen. I got out early on good behavior and all that, and came out a different person. I'm still far from perfect, and even that was, 8 years ago or whatever, 7 years ago. And I've still grown each day from that, because I'm a prideful person, and I know that, so I can get to the point where I'm too apologetic because I'm trying to counteract that, but then I have to remember that it's okay to be confident too, So It's just been about finding that balance ever since then, and the unconditional love of somebody like my wife that has. I wouldn't be where I am today. There's just no way, and her family too, and my family. It's
a good woman.
Yeah, this December will be our 20th anniversary.
Congratulations.
High school sweethearts, yeah.
That's awesome.
She's been very patient.
So how does, when you're walking through, because this industry that we're in, it's contentious, it's rivalrous, if that's a word, which apparently I make up words all the time. But how does being in prison change how you see the interactions that you have online with these people? And there's one interaction I'm specifically thinking about that I'd like to ask you about, but first I want to hear your answer.
I just don't take people seriously. I don't, especially online. If somebody's face to face with me, it's a little different. I've been blessed to never be in trouble for physical stuff. I've never, just had assaults or anything crazy like that. But I've been a very physical person in my past, and I, as a younger guy, had kind of a rough childhood, and so I'm really face to face type of a person, and I just don't take people seriously, even as much as I should sometimes. So as a direct result of that, I don't take things as personal. So, yeah.
So you had an interaction recently on the Pyro forums, on the Pyro Facebook with, it was Seth Eakins and another, oh God, who was the other guy? They were trying to fill the carts as full as they could get them.
It was Cole Lundrow, I think is his name.
The other guy. There we go. And you gave them each a discount code and a challenge to see who could fill the cart the highest. But number one, I mean, if I'm Serge, I'm like, yes, please do this all day long, right? Like, break the shopping cart. Let's go. But Seth is known, and I've had some interactions with Seth. He's known as a kind of a rabble rouser. I think we could probably call him that.
Sure.
Which, by the way, speaking of Seth, you're always welcome on the show. I would love to have you on.
Oh man, you're asking for trouble.
I am asking for trouble, but there's a story there, and I want to hear that story. It just the grace that you operated in that situation with, where you could tell that, I really honestly don't know what interactions you've had with Seth, but his reputation probably precedes him here. You had a lot of grace in that interaction. I was impressed by it. I really was. Like, it was one of those moments where I was like, man, this guy, Derek is, it just surprised me. I was impressed. What, do you find that there's just more grace to be given since that time?
Yeah, and I mean, there's much more in my life that has created that. That was just one of those click moments,
Yeah.
It's a big thing, but it's a small thing to me in the scope, when you're talking about the prison again.
Yeah.
But no, man, it takes energy to be mad at people. It takes energy to do all of that. And it takes a little bit of energy to change your ways and figure out how to speak to people in a way where you're not putting yourself beneath them, but you're also not downplaying their worth either. And if you can find that balance, not only does it make the people you're speaking to feel better about the situation, about themselves, but it, for me anyway, really instilled a lot more confidence in me personally in the last few years. Since my business, when I had to close that, it was heartbreaking for me. I'm sure we'll get into that a little more, but so I went through a couple of rough times in the last 5 years, since any of that I had to climb out of, and for the better, The way you talk to people goes a long way.
I agree.
Derek really opened up to me. He didn't have to. I was very impressed and very moved at the same time by his openness to talk about some of the difficulties that he's faced in his past. We all have things hidden in the closet that we don't want seen. And he talked about them. And that takes a lot of courage, and it takes a lot of steadiness and integrity to do it as well. He's owned up to his mistakes, he's paid for them, and he has become a better person as a result. In next week's episode, we talk about what happens when his integrity comes into conflict with what you might call bad business practices. I hope that you guys will enjoy it. I'd like to thank my patrons. My patrons are awesome. If you'd like to support me on Patreon, you can find the link down below. My patrons get an audio-only version of all of these interviews. They get it the day that the interview uploads. Sometimes it includes extras. It's pretty fun. They also get to talk to me, and they have some input on who we should have on the show. So if you'd like to be a patron, I would appreciate your support. With that said, like, subscribe, comment, do all those things, and I will see you in a couple days.